source of the sickness. Now, this medicine man is trying to determine what spirit has caused this boy's sickness. We receive training in linguistics, and we go to language groups where languages have never been written. We reduce the language to writing. Then we give them an alphabet. And the way we begin is just by living with the people. We go through the village every day, and we start by pointing to objects, gathering words. We start with the nouns, and it was at this time I discovered the word for paper. You know, they had never seen paper before, and it's yokel, which means banana leaf. And the word for pencil, they said, is namad, which means thorn. And for writing is wuni, which means carving. And they got so excited to see their language carved on the banana leaf. And they would ask me questions like, Kora dimu mani, dimu yoku wuni kora. What is it that you're carving on that banana leaf? And I said, Koriyaigen to yoku wuni. I'm carving your talk. And they said, my talk? You mean the words that are coming out of my mouth? You're carving on the banana leaf? They got so excited, and the people were just beautiful to work with. This woman is seeing her language written on the banana leaf for the very first time. The people really didn't understand what was involved in learning a language. They thought that if I would eat more of their food, that I could speak the language automatically. And so they were encouraging me to eat their fish and to eat their sago paste and their crocodile meat, which I did. And it was at this time that I became aware that some of the people really were interested in reading their own language. But for most of them, they saw very little value in reading and writing. They knew how to fish, how to build their houses, how to build their canoes, so why did they have to know how to read and write? So I had a problem in motivating them and getting them excited about wanting to read and write their own language. So while I was at Ukarumpa, which is our linguistics center, I decided to ask the JARS pilot to do me a favor. I typed up one of their cultural stories in their own language, and I ran 500 copies of this letter, and I gave it to the pilot. And I said, could you fly over the village and throw these letters out on the village? And so the pilot was very excited about doing this, and the plane flew low over the village and threw all these banana leaves out on the village. And everyone was in their canoes running after these banana leaves, and they looked at it, and they saw that there was carving on the banana leaf. But not one person in the entire village could read it. The chief of the village became so disturbed and so concerned about this that he called a village meeting, and he decided that 20 young fellas had to come to my literacy class and learn to read and write their language. This was the breakthrough. It was really an exciting time, and this was the beginning of our literacy program. 20 students then became the teachers, carving their own language on a banana leaf. They wanted to learn everything about everything. My sister Shirley taught them how to add and subtract and multiply and to use the calculators. That was really something. Sewing. And today, in Hauna Village, there are over 200 people who can read and write their own language. We developed 5 teams of translation helpers. We work in teams of 2, and we average about 10 verses a day, and it became a very intense but exciting work, carving God's talk on the banana leaf. We translated the entire New Testament in a rough first draft, a handwritten copy of the entire New Testament. And then the fellows themselves typed it up. And then they started to use the scriptures to meet the needs of the village. You know, when someone was sick, they would take a verse and read it to the people, meeting the needs of the people through the scriptures. That became very meaningful in their everyday life. The translation helpers, however, were very concerned that the older people were not involved in the work. They wanted to have the leaders to help us, the big men. And so I asked them if they would help us, and I said, "You're the leaders of the village. You're the big men. You're the ones that really understand the language, and we need your help if we're going to get this job done." And so we asked several men from each of the clans in the village. And we had 24 volunteers and some very powerful medicine men. This was really neat. Every day from 6:30 to 7:30, these 24 older men would come and they would listen to what we had translated for that day, giving suggestions and helping us to make the translation a little bit more meaningful. These older men later referred to themselves as the judges. Our word for doctor is ingam huisugi, which means the man who spits, the spitter. We have blind people in our village, and never has a medicine man been able to heal a blind person. Here Danny and Tom are reading one of the verses that we had translated for that day in John chapter 9, verse 6, where it talks about Jesus healing the blind man. And they were reading, and Jesus spat on the ground and made mud and put it on the blind man's eyes, and the blind man received his sight. And these men said, "He did what?" And Danny and Tom said, "Jesus spit on the ground." And they said, "Jesus spit? Why, Jesus must be the most powerful spitter in the whole world." And do you know that these older men, right then and there at that time, identified with Jesus? Why, he's just like we are, but he has much more power. You know, I'd like to believe that God put that particular story in his word just to reach and touch the hearts of the Sepik Iwam people. These men played an important role in helping us find key words in the translation. Now, one of the words we struggled with was the word for forgiveness. One Christmas day, we were having the dedication of a new house, and people were coming in their canoes from every part of the village. Everyone was coming, and they were circling the house, and they had joined hands. And as Joel was praying the prayer of dedication, he said, "Oh, Ati Kumwi, Kramil kuan maraka maraka noe, oh Papa God, our throats are happy. Thank you for this house." In the middle of that prayer, the people put their arms around one another's shoulders. I had never seen this kind of affection shown before. And when it was over, I went to Joel and I said, "Joel, what did it mean when the people put their arms around one another's shoulders?" And Joel was